There we go. We are live. All right. Welcome everyone to our March live stream. What is a trigger and how can I help myself or maybe a friend? We're gonna have Mary Ellen Mann of the Mann Counseling Group with us later. I'm Natasha Fish, the Board of the Directors Chair for Be Emboldened, and absolutely thrilled to produce today's call, today's live stream. We will be listening to the content that Mary Ellen and Naomi recorded before we dive into the live Q&A with them in about 45 minutes. So if you're here and you want to come back, you've already listened to the podcast, check in 45 minutes and we'll have Mary Ellen here to answer your questions with Naomi. This episode is already on our podcast, Reclamation, so you can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'm also going to put a link in the chat for our podcast page so you can see where to find that. Great episodes. There's lots more there, so definitely check that out. So I have Naomi here with me today to kind of talk about why we're talking about this topic. So Naomi, this is a great topic to tackle, but I'd love to hear just the background behind why this, why now, why does this matter?
Well, the reason this conversation came up initially in my mind was because I was running into some obstacles with different people I was talking with in regards to triggers. There seemed to be some confusion around this big word. You know, it's a hot word out there. And so what is a trigger actually? Something that I find fascinating and really valuable is what actually happens in our brain and in our bodies when our brains, we don't have one, and our bodies when we are being triggered. And that information, that education can also then lead to, okay, so what can we do? Because yes, if we are oftentimes being triggered, or we are having a reoccurring trigger, or we're having triggers that are really strong and overwhelming, these are all things that we want to do something about. We want to help ourselves. And yes, professional support is, of course, huge. I will always recommend that to people if possible, and they're able to find a good fit, which is something we'd love to educate on as well. But there's also things we can do in the moment, because yes, we could go talk to someone. I could be scheduled to talk to my therapist on Monday, but if I get triggered this afternoon, Monday's kind of far away. So what can I do right now? And I wanted to offer that information to people. And so Mary Ellen Mann is a specialist in a variety of trauma-informed circles, and she's a published author, and I think you're going to get into some of that as far as her bio, but she's a great person to bring some additional insight to this topic.
Yeah, I know from my personal experience, the best therapists are going to equip you to be able to handle what's going to come up. It's not intended to be, a relationship where you are always depending on that person, that therapist, to give you what you need. But a good therapist will help you live your life beyond just that 60-minute session on a Monday. So I'm excited about this information as well. I found it personally beneficial listening to it. And so I'm excited for you guys to hear that too. So just so you guys all know, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and the work we're doing, getting this information out to people that need to know it, does depend on the generosity of people like you. So we're really glad that you're here, that you care about this work, about preventing religious abuse and providing the support for people. And we've got big plans for 2022. So I just want to take this time to invite you. If you're liking what you're hearing and you're excited about this work, please partner with us. We'd love to have you part of our team of volunteers, donors, supporters who are moving this mission forward. So if you'd like to give today to what this work is all about, follow that link in the chat and check us out. One-time monthly donations. We are no donations too small. This work really matters, and we're glad that you're part of us doing it. So follow us too, comment on social media, share our website with people you know, leave positive reviews. All of this helps other people find us and get the information that they need to help them thrive. So we appreciate you, and we also appreciate you sticking with us as we're getting this live stream figured out. We've been doing it for several months now, and if you've watched prior conversations, you've probably noticed some glitches and things we've been trying to work out to resolve. I'm hopeful that today we figured out a solution for some of that. So, but if you see any glitches, then that is why. We're still working on this, but know that we are committed to making these live streams as high quality as possible. And we really appreciate your patience as we work to do that. So like I mentioned, Naomi and Mary Ellen will be with us after this pre-recorded content to answer your questions. So start adding those to the chat as you're listening to the recording, or if you have any off the top of your head, and we will be answering those later. I'm excited for you to hear from these two experts, and enjoy watching, listening to our pre-recorded.
Story time. I was struggling with how to handle my anger well. My husband would say something to me that, while not truly the same, felt too similar to things said to me when I was young. Sometimes it wasn't even what he said, but how he said it, or the expression on his face when he spoke. Opposite of how I responded as a child, which was to completely shut down and crawl inside of myself, I flipped out instead. As I learned how to respond to my anger, I realized that underneath I had been triggered, and there were steps I could take to calm myself down, reminding myself that this situation was not the same. I was safe, and I had the opportunity to be different than what had been modeled for me most of my life. Mary Ellen Mann holds a wealth of information about this area of triggers. She is a survivor of sexual trauma and a licensed psychotherapist, running her outpatient private practice for nearly 25 years in Colorado. She has dedicated her life to helping victims find voice and confidence in her therapy and in her training of advocates in the United States and elsewhere. In her passion to prevent childhood sexual abuse, she is also a trained and certified facilitator with Darkness to Light. Mary Ellen has an advanced degree from Columbia University and is an active believer in Jesus. She lives in Denver with her loving husband and sons. To learn more about her approach and experience, please find her website linked in the show notes. There you will find more information about resources she uses in her psychotherapy practice, along with information about abuse and trauma as it relates to interpersonal and organizational abuse. So Mary Ellen, welcome. And I want to jump right in and get us started by defining and offering clarification on a very popular word that we're hearing often right now. Yeah. So would you please give us some background? What is a trigger?
So a trigger is something that happens in the environment. It could be a smell, a taste, an object that we're looking at, an experience we're having with another person. And the trigger is going to basically kind of automatically move us into an anxious spot. So I would suggest, like, we have healthy anxiety and then we can have distorted anxiety. Now, the big idea, though, just anatomically speaking, is that anxiety is going to push, us into a fight, flight, freeze. And then a new F word, not a bad word, but a new F word is fawning. And so to explain that, so we get it combative as our fight, or we get really what did you mean by that? Or what were you thinking? Or we can kind of get into a blaming space and be, again, combative. The flight is avoidant. I won't ever talk to that person again. I won't ever go to that place again. I'll never talk about that again. Well, I just will do whatever I can to avoid ever thinking about that again. And the frozen is just feeling numb or doing things that are numbing so that our body is, if you will, kind of developing an anesthetized feeling to ward off the anxiety and the sense of threat and danger. And the fawning is the active, it's a very endorsed reaction that we have, like serve everybody, accommodate everybody, say yes, not no, don't offend, don't set limit, make sure you are people pleasing. Maybe even rescuing is a fawning mode. Making excuses for people is a fawning mode. So we have those 4 Fs that define the body's experience of a trigger. But a trigger can be anything that can unconsciously or consciously earmark an event where we felt threatened. So a trigger can be traffic, being stuck in traffic. It can be someone cuts me off, while I'm driving. It could be smelling, someone's cologne and remembering just that sense of threat from a historical event. It could be a Bible verse. It could be a song. It could be a joke someone thinks they're making that's just a super casual experience. And then they're saying words like chick and whore and all of a sudden we're just like pulled into a high anxiety space. It could be a way we are touched or not touched. There could be, a trigger in the sense like we feel confused or gaslit, which is we feel like I was trying to say something and now the person is like making me feel crazy. So that can be a trigger. So that's a dynamic trigger, like between people. Yeah, it could be a sense of pain in the body or a doctor's appointment, where we're having to get evaluated for something, dental, or say, an annual exam. So we are triggered because our body is kind of re-experiencing vulnerability at some level.
Absolutely. I'm so fascinated by this topic personally. And partially the reason is because I've noticed changes in my own self and how I respond to triggers. And I've been thinking through, is it more related to my own process, like continued healing in my journey, where I'm changing. And so therefore the way I respond to a trigger is changing? Or does the way I respond to a trigger sometimes depend on the person who's triggering me and how I respond to that specific individual? Yeah. And it's something I have curiosity around. Would you be able to speak to that a little bit?
If you're changing, yes, I can tell you that people have told me I used to not be this, they'll say sensitive to this problem. And now I'm so sensitive. And they feel like it's a regression, but it's actually your body is somehow experiencing like the permission. Maybe you're an adult, you have more choices. Maybe your life is safer. And so what happens when we get more, if you will, triggered, we're not really regressing as much as we're moving past the idea that we're stuck, trapped, cannot speak, silenced, have to be numb, have to accommodate, all of those things. And so we're getting more real, right? Like we're getting more congruent. And congruency just simply, and probably a lot of your listeners already know what this means, but congruency is just my insides really do flesh out and match my outsides. So that joke is now not funny, and I'm in touch with that joke is offensive to me. So sometimes when we're shifting, like back when I'm 18, that joke would not have offended me. Now I'm 35 and that joke offends me. Back when I'm 16, traffic doesn't bother me. But now that I'm 40, traffic really bothers me. So it's not a regression as much as it is your body feeling the permission to show you how much you've had an embedded, stress and trauma and sense of threat. So there's that. I think also that can include, like you mentioned at the end, the dynamic. Like someone is now talking to me. I feel more sensitive to a pastor. I feel more sensitive to someone in authority. I feel more sensitive to, say, an old friend. This happens a lot. Like people will come to me and they're like, I feel like I can't tolerate, my friendships I developed when I was in a more traumatized state. So those friendships were used to maybe laughing at you and you kind of let them. And now you're like, I don't want you laughing at me. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel subjected or dominated. There can be a shift. It feels like I'm getting more sensitive, so I'm breaking, and I'm air quoting all that, but it's actually not a regression. It's a progression of your body noticing problems and things that are, in fact, not okay with you, whether they're we say not okay as it's really threatening, or it's not okay as in my values have really changed and I feel like I can hold my values forward and really pay attention to myself now. My encouragement is that sensitivity is a part of progression. oftentimes. And the world says, don't be sensitive, just buck up and be okay. But I think we're seeing a lot of things, even with sports figures and such, that we herald as people who are super tough, saying, yeah, I'm capable, but it isn't safe and it isn't going to work. And it's okay to not be okay with that. And the world, I think, is shifting into it's okay to not be okay, and to actually live in the experience you're having and honor it. And when we honor it, we tend to get well. It's a wonderful event. So anyway, just want to offer that encouragement.
Yes, and when you say it that way, of course, it sounds so common sense, but it's a lot. It's one of those easier said than done things, right?
Oh yeah.
There's so much pressure. Yeah, there's so much pressure from culture to perform. And when we're talking about people who have had various kinds of abuse, and more specifically in this context, various kinds of abuse under that umbrella of religious or spiritual abuse, they're being pressured to perform in a certain way, and they're being told to do this, or there can be even up to eternal consequences that they're being told will happen in their lives. And so to break out of that pressure to perform,
what a deep, overwhelming threat.
Yes, absolutely.
So for them to come forward and say, I'm going to bank on and take this risk, that I'm not going to let that, I'm not going to feel okay about that anymore. I mean, that is the ultimate act of courage.
Yeah, it is. And something else that you made me think of while you were speaking and summarizing that so well is I realized, gosh, this was probably like 5 or 6 years ago. I was in this environment for my job. So I was in this work environment with a supervisor figure who oftentimes would trigger me with similarities of my home environment. So just the way this person supervised, I was reminded of my father. And interestingly, I responded then in the same way. Which that makes sense to me. I respond in the same way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so I would kind of cower because that person provided something I needed to me. So that person was I needed that income. I needed that. I wanted that financial security, that job security. I also loved what I was doing. And so I was like, well, this person has something over me. So I'm going to cower. I'm not going to assert. Now, fortunately, I learned how to assert through that process. It was an incredible learning experience for me, a growth and healing experience. Yeah. But I realized when that was happening, anytime at home, my husband would do something that really wasn't that triggering in and of itself, but maybe alluded to that supervisor that, there's almost like this ping pong thing happening. I would fight, all out fight. And it was such an over response. And so something that I found interesting through that learning process and being able to reflect on it is we can also respond to different people differently, even if they are similarly triggering us, based on what power we think we've deemed that they have in that situation.
Said. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I call that having like a level 10 response to a level 4 problem.
Yep.
Usually that spousal dynamic is more mutual. You're co-resourcing, right? So ideally, and all the complications of what that can be defined as. So people will feel the freedom to finally fight, to finally say, "Are you kidding me? No way!" And it's not level 10 response because there's no real pain. I'm not saying that. But it's safer for that level 10 pain to emerge and get out. So the problem is, I'm not suggesting it's not real within the person. It is a level 10 pain, but the actual event is a level 4 problem. Just as a matter of putting it to numbers tend to help me. So 10 is a high distress number. It's like a pain scale you might see someone use in triaging in an ER or something. Like, what's your level of pain? Where do you feel it? And so 1 is neutral and fine. So that's where my number value is coming from.
Yes, that is helpful. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about once individuals are triggered, they oftentimes do feel at a loss. And so when they're in that moment, what are some practical suggestions that you offer to your clients for when they're at home and they're in need of supports they can engage on their own right then and there?
You know, I'm going to offer my ideas, but I definitely want the listeners to go, that's not realistic, or that doesn't sound like something I can really do, because I would never say it's prescriptive. It's a suggestion that could help. And I definitely don't want anyone to feel that they're failing if the ideas I'm giving do not fully respond to the pain. But some beginning pieces, and it really depends on, am I at home? Am I in a car? Am I at work? You know, am I in a social situation with other women? You know, so I think, you know, with other men that are friends of mine, and, or am I camping? You know, I mean, so it could be like lots of different things. One of the things I really care about is a toolbox. And the toolbox just helps with all the 5 senses. This is something that if you can create a toolbox at home, and a toolbox that you can have in your car, a toolbox you can then separately create at the office. This is just something that tends to, I want to call the toolbox like a loving friend. It doesn't judge your reactions. It doesn't need you to even change how you feel. It just wants to lower the distress. So the you know, taking it from the 8, 9, or 10, moving it towards the 4, 5, or 6, and we hope obviously much lower. But I think it's important, you know, just to see it as a friend. And the toolbox really is just addressing our senses, because the body is recovering feelings, right? And pain or distress, sense of threat. It's recovering that as a part of progressing and healing, which is so tough. And so I say, like, we've got to look at, what do you need to taste? What do you need to smell? What do you need to touch? What do you need to hear? What do you need to, so we've got taste, touch, smell, feeling. And there's a 5th one. I'm so sorry. I'm like blanking right now.
Yeah. Taste, touch, smell, feel, hear.
And
so I'm not sure which one. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe
which one you missed the first round.
Okay. So one of my, so the toolbox is, can I plug in music, you know, at work that gives me a sense of calm? And I would love for people to really test their toolkit. Don't wait until you're like at that level 10 and cross your fingers and go, boy, I hope this works. Yes. You know, test it out. Like, some people hate peppermint, some people hate spearmint. So we need to have a bubble gum. We need to have, you know, an orange gum. We need to have, so using a taste element that really makes you feel freed up and relaxed. Chewing gum is helpful because it just gives the body a place of release. It's an activity, but it's also a taste. Also, some people have chosen things that kind of melt in their mouth, like, you know, raisinets or a milk dud, you know, or so they can hold the chocolate, taste the chocolate, then taste the raisin or the caramel, and then just noticing the mouth moving, you know, the substance and tasting all of the textures and so forth. This is a grounding event because it's a physical experience to be triggered. We want a physical response. Okay. We want a physical solution, not a head solution quite yet. Then something I can see can be a photo of my children or a photo of, you know, I found it on YouTube, like this beautiful sunset, or this, you know, finding Google images of a forest or something that you can just quickly snap into your phone, but it's a screenshot. And so we're just pulling ourselves in there. And then maybe also having, not maybe, but the next thing is sound. What is we have the sound, we have the image, we have the taste. Touch is a little strange in the sense, like maybe touch is just pressing your palms together. So you inhale, press, exhale, and you inhale with your palms together, kind of like you can do it like you're praying, or you can switch the palms around where the fingers are going in opposite directions. And that's your touch. You're chewing gum. I have essential oils as well for smell, but sometimes people feel like that minty gum, you know, that orange flavored, whatever it might be, really helps with the smell. And some people hold like tokens if they've had, you know, a token like a seashell or they have like someone gave them something like a locket, or they can see that locket and go, okay, my grandmother loves me or something, like I've been thought of. There's that reminds me of a beautiful experience at the beach. That reminds me of my, something that makes them feel safe and loved. In trauma work, we look for not how many days since the last time you were hurt, but how many days you felt safe since the last time you were hurt. Building safety into my day is very important. Tea is great. People feel like that can really center them. Coffee, that smell and taste is really helpful. But if I'm on the road, I can't access that, maybe, So traveling with your toolkit, having it like on your vacations, having it just caring enough to even hold, like, if in fact there is a concern, I have this, I have access to this. There's there are a lot of studies about people who they get a prescription for Xanax and they never use it, but they got the prescription for Xanax, which is a benzodiazepine that calms you immediately within like 10 to 15 minutes from a panic attack. And I'm not against if that is something that needs to happen, but psychologically, similar to the toolbox, they don't have to use the Xanax because they know it's there. They don't have as much panic.
Yes.
So even if you're like, but I'm only using my toolbox like once a year, is that normal? Yeah, because your body goes, she's got a plan, he's got a plan, so I don't need to get to 10.
Right.
That's one idea. Let's say I'm in a meeting and I'm like, people are talking over me and I'm getting dominated, or my ideas are being stolen in a situation, or, someone's getting credit. There's a great technique with regard to, again, palm pressing, but also putting your palms against your knees and just lifting your knee up a little bit. You can do this even when you're at a board meeting or something. And just pressing your palm against your knees. What that's doing is it's activating that core of the body, the psoas muscles, I think they're muscles, and engaging the stomach a little bit, which helps the brain move into the torso.
Okay, I need to try this while you're talking.
Yeah,
I know you can see me, so I'm like, okay, let's try this.
Yeah, and then it's just kind of saying, okay, my body is real. My body is real. And then you're in the meeting and just go, okay, what are 5 things I'm noticing that I can see? What are 4 things I'm hearing? What are 3 things I'm smelling? What is 1 thing I'm tasting? 1 thing I'm feeling physically, and the physical pushing the palms against the knees. There's also meridian tapping, which people have told me they do under the table. So we'll talk about meridian tapping too. Going into the meridians are just acupressure points. That's all a meridian means. So it's not deep mindfulness. This is just going, okay, I have a real body, but we're tapping the karate chop points. And you can do that underneath the table if you're talking to someone. But you can also excuse yourself from the meeting and do all the tapping points in a bathroom stall. So people have told me they've done that. Or before a first date with someone, they've done tapping in the bathroom or in their car before they got out. And I have meridian tapping process. That is a worksheet that's listed under resources on my website, marielynmann.com. You click on resources and then there's healing practices. Just click on that and you're going to see the document for meridian tapping. And it's harder to tie your shoes than it is to do meridian tapping. So, because you're literally going through about 10 points on the body. So the top of the head, between the eyes, on the temples, and you're doing 10 to 20 taps under the eyes here. So between the eyes, temples, under the eyes, under the nose, in the chin crease, at the clavicle, close to the clavicle and sternum, and then under the arms, like so. Now, I work a lot with sexually abused people. They have been, so physical stuff can be triggering. Tapping can be triggering, but 90% of my clientele is okay with it. But even then, we just say, let's just go to the points that feel the most activating in terms of calming you down. So it's a non-medicine response. It gives you control. You can do this if you're stuck in traffic as well. You can do like the palm against the knees. You can do palm to palm presses. And the final one is you can do where you take the palm of your hand against your elbow and you're creating kind of a tension between the elbow going down and the palm resisting it. So the elbow going down and the palm resisting it. These are all things that help that amygdala in the back of the brain release from anxiety into the whole body. We want to unlock the anxious response. This is not about saying your anxiety is not important. It's just giving you some ideas so that your body can start to feel like it has access to helping you. Really, you're giving your body access to help you.
Yes. And it's so important because oftentimes we're getting triggered in a situation where we have to respond in some way. Example, a response in a meeting is I can excuse myself to go to the restroom, but I do need to return to this meeting.
Yeah.
So what can I do in those 4 or 5 minutes that I have that can help me until maybe I get home and I can process this more later, but I can't really fully process this now. So these are incredibly helpful suggestions. And I love that as much as I myself have loved using a lap weighted blanket at times, it's not great to use in a meeting. It's not great to, and it's heavy to lug around, even the lap ones, it weighs several pounds. And so it's just very functional. Something I had suggested, recently, which was interesting when I was looking back, I'm like, gosh, I wish I had known this a few years ago. The idea of putting something sour, like a sour patch or like a lemon drop in your mouth. And that's something I've been thinking like, oh, I should just keep those on me just in case, to pop that in to be like, okay, yes, I'm here. It kind of like snaps you back. So same idea with, the peppermint
same idea.
Or something.
Perfect. I love that. And I haven't done the more sour bitter. I've done more mint chocolate combo, so and then I really think it comes, and some people are like, I hate all things sugar, that's disgusting. So it would be a salt for you, like something salty, like just having those single packets of almonds that are like wasabi almonds or salt and vinegar almonds, or where they're really letting themselves go, okay, this is a taste that I like. I can feel it, notice it. My body, and here's the big thing I'm always going for, your body is functional and it wants to help you. Otherwise you couldn't taste, touch, see, smell, and hear. So, and if I am talking with someone right now who's like, I can't see, then I say, well, what can you hear? And your body wants to help you feel grounded and centered and in control. So I'm a big believer in we are built for power and love and a sound mind. We're built to be wise. We're built to feel in control. And so there's nothing wrong with moving in whatever the direction is that helps you regain control. And yes, in my office as a therapist, I have 2 types of weighted blankets. One's a 30-pound adult couch blanket. And I specify that just in case people are shopping. You can go to Bed Bath & Beyond, and I hold no endorsement policies or anything like that. But that's just one place. I think Target sells them. Nordstrom Rack sells them online. And let's see. And then I do a 15-pounder as well. Sometimes I'll add the 15-pounder just over the hips and stomach, and then I have the 30-pounder underneath. And I have a heating pad that also can be quite comforting, and we can lower the heat and all those things. Some of my clients have been really hurt sexually, so they put the heating pad underneath their hips, the seat of the couch, and that has really helped them feel like, okay, my body is in a safe place. That's soothing. So let's see, and I have essential oils, and you can get them at like lots of retailers, from Whole Foods and Sprouts. And I don't know, I think I don't know if Trader Joe's, because West Coast, and I love Trader Joe's, but I don't think they have them, but you can buy them online. There are, of course, a lot of MLMs that that sell them.
Yes.
But a lot of vitamin stores will have them. And that's used in here. And of course, then I do EMDR, brain spotting, and other types of therapy techniques. So, but I was going to say, like, you mentioned something that's really good about like, okay, I've got to stabilize at work, but then I can process more later. I do believe in guided journaling not because a person cannot, quote, be trusted to journal just free flow. But a lot of times, you know, what went missing in cult experiences was the sense that I can trust my judgment, right? And
Yes,
I can totally know exactly what is going on, right? And to restore that, to create stepping stones to restore that, I have something called the resiliency protocol. That's a full journaling event. And that's also on my website, and certainly tailor it. Like, get rid of half of the stuff I suggest if it's not going to work for you. But it just offers some kind of guidepost, like, what's the event? To what degree did it hurt you on a 1 to 10 scale? What are the emotions that come with that? You know, what is the lie or old belief that comes with that? And then what does it normally cause me to do? But then we go into what we call the disputation, which is I'm going to dispute that this old way of thinking and doing, and say, but is it true 24/7 that I'm always thinking this lie? And generally we're like, well, you're sleeping, you're probably eating, you know, so probably not, no. And then we say, so what is it that you want to know that would bring confidence and counter that lie? And that's where the money is. That's where people are like, oh, I want to know I can trust my judgment. I am fine as I am. I'm lovable and worthwhile. Okay. So then the resiliency protocol goes into things like, where can you imagine a safe place where those things are true? You have a protector, you have a nurturer in that safe place. The protector can be a bear, and the nurturer can be your grandma or your grandpa, I don't know, like good people, your best friend. It can be a fictional character. Mine's a fictional character. And so that's a place where those things can be true. How does that make you feel now? Otherwise, we look at mastery. What are some times in your life where you've known, I trusted my judgment and it worked, you know? So we look at mastery events. So it gives you a chance to really pull your concentration into a new wiring. And the things that are firing are wiring. So if we're firing those ideas, then the wiring just does its own thing. It's a little bit like eating. We don't know how it happens that we eat food and it works, but we don't know how we sleep and it works. But this is the same idea. It works. Those things start to go and become a foundational defense system that grounds you. I have mastered this. I am allowed to know I'm safe. I am allowed to feel content and relieved and strong and confident. And then we say, where do you feel it in your body? If you can't feel it, where would you like to feel it? And how true does it start to feel to you on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 is it's totally true, and 1 is not at all true. So it's a 2. Okay, so you feel the 2 in your throat, you feel it behind your eyes. What color is with that? And it becomes, we're initializing, right? Where the body is creating all of these connections. And believe it or not, those connections will wake you up in a minute where you are getting an uncomfortable threat feeling. But because of that confidence, the body doesn't go to 10, it goes to 6. And so, gosh, you know, language, we're built for language. We're built to connect dots. And it's a huge part of the gift of our intelligence. But initializing it physically is where the magic is. Like language, where is it in the body? How strong does it feel? True does it feel? What might you start to do now if you're in that situation again?
Yes.
You're writing and you're writing and you're writing. And I tell people, I would not be sitting before you today if 2 things didn't happen. That I read Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend, and that I journaled all the time. I journaled every observation with no guide. I could have filled like a good shelf, you know, of journals with my journals for sure. So that's that processing can also happen live with a therapist. It can be just the journal. It can be the spouse, the best friend.
Before I move on.
Sorry.
Oh goodness. No, that's why you're here.
You are feeling like you just drank from a fire hose. I apologize.
Well, what's super helpful though is that you have these, again, I'm going to put your website in the show notes. And so people can go back and they can pull this up and even look at it while they replay that portion and be able to, see it in front of them, which I think is so helpful. Yeah. And before I transition to our last question, I want to just go back and really highlight what you said about that we're not designed to be out of control. Like I am not designed to not have control over my body and my thoughts and my emotions. I am designed to be in control of those. So when I feel out of control of any or all of those because I have been triggered, my initial step is to regain that sense of control. Then I can go back, like we said, and that's when we can then do the processing. That's where I can then be like, okay, I feel grounded again. I'm present in my body. Yeah. I'm able to go through and see which thoughts were true, which ones are do not actually apply to this situation. What is my actual safety? And I can go through that process. Yep. But I have to stabilize first. I can't do that in that moment. Just like if I were a 10 on the anger scale and most of my brain has shut off, you're not going to be able to have a rational conversation with me. If I am overwhelmed with anxiety, fear, some sort of trauma response from being triggered, I'm not going to be able to be calm. Obviously, I mean, it sounds silly, but we can expect that of ourselves sometimes. And it's an unrealistic and unfair expectation of ourselves. And so in those moments, Mary Ellen, I love that you are sharing so many ways to really love ourselves and care for ourselves well. And that is it's the most important step because it's that first step. We can't really do any further deeper work if we're not honoring that experience first. Yeah. So thank you. And I know that you and I are mutually huge proponents of support professionals. We believe in them. We believe in them. We believe in finding good ones and we believe in finding good fits to even tailor that down further. So for anyone who is listening, I know that people in our audience, our listeners, they can feel concerned because of that trust component of who do I trust? Who do I go to? Who is safe? What would you suggest for what they should be looking for and what are some first steps they can take in finding that person?
First steps. I mean, I think that I want them to write down what they want to feel and what they want to get out of it. What do I want to feel when I'm in their presence and what do I want to get out of this? And because people can list themselves as trauma specialists or, I don't know, this many years in practice and so forth, which it certainly does matter. But no matter what the description that they have found in like their search, that it is an investment of assessing wisely what is in fact, am I feeling safe and cared about? Am I feeling believed and supported? And is this person going to help me get more confident with my gut instinct? Because if you really do break down the trauma experience, systems that abuse, people that abuse, and so forth, the victims of that are, I say, if I were to put it into a body experience or an example, it breaks their femur. The femur is your stabilizing bone, so and it takes you have to be in a wheelchair, you have to be pinned, you can't put any weight on it for 6. It's a very big event to have your gut instinct robbed, your ability to trust your instinct robbed from you. So will this person help me build my gut instinct again? And so I would look for licensed professionals because they're held to an ethics standard of care. And certainly, we have to complete CEUs, which are continuing education units. We have to pay for our license. We have to have had supervised hours, not just completing a master's degree. So I care a lot about people who are licensed. I know people go to life coaches sometimes, and I love life coaches for things like I need to get more organized. I need to understand my work goals, maybe development at another. But when we're talking about trauma, I urge you to consider working with people who are seasoned in the work of trauma, who are trauma informed. And that's a word I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard of, but trauma-informed care, that conceptually was birthed into the mental health world somewhere around 10 years ago, and then really hit the scene in 2016, 17, 18, and on. And so let's make sure we're talking to people who are trauma-informed. And trauma-informed at the gut, the total core of it is they understand there's not something wrong with you. There's something that's happened to you. And they really help their client stay with that narrative. Like something's happened to you, not something is wrong with you. And so that gentle and compassionate, model of care has to be in play for people to feel safe to heal.
Hey, all right, we are back after such a great conversation between Mary Ellen and Naomi. We are actually waiting for Mary Ellen to join us here, so just wanted to let you guys know if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We have had a couple come in already, so we're excited to get to those and be able to answer them. But Naomi, I would love to hear from you, any updates we had to share or things about this conversation that we should think about as we're thinking about questions to submit while we wait for Mary Ellen to join us.
So I just had an audio issue, and I know you were talking, and I don't know if you were talking to me or if you were talking to people who are watching. So if you just asked me a question, will you please repeat it?
No worries. I just realized I had my sound down super low. So I was like, oh no, did Naomi abandon me as well? But, yeah, after listening to this conversation again about triggers, I'm excited to get into the questions, but while we're waiting for Mary Ellen to join us, is there anything about this topic that you want to add to it before we get into questions? We've already got some coming in, but anything about triggers that maybe is, I don't know, relevant today that wasn't when we recorded this conversation, or anything that's you recently regarding this topic?
Sure. So something that I've had come up, I've had it come up in a few different ways, like personally, just with friends. Also, I would actually say more so that way, which is really interesting to me. But the word trigger at times, I've seen it be used as, actually, she is calling me. So I'm going to let you jump back in. I'm going to take this call because I'm guessing she's having technical difficulties.
Okay, great. Thanks, Naomi. Gotta love Livestream, right? You can't hide. If there's something going wrong, you guys know it. So hopefully we'll be able to get Mary Ellen on here with us to answer these questions. But yeah, I think triggers is definitely a hot topic, one that we want to make sure is addressed. I think that's our heart behind these topics, is making sure that you guys have tools for what you're facing, things that are happening in culture, things that are lived experience. So I'll just share, actually, while we're waiting for Naomi and Mary Ellen to get back on, something that, if you guys haven't checked out our podcast lately, we just dropped a new episode about deconstruction, which is another hot topic. If you've never heard of it before, you probably will, or if you know a lot about it, I'd encourage you to check it out. We're asking the question, what do we mean by deconstruction? A pitfall you need to know about. Naomi and Lemon talk about how critical it is to define terms, just in general, but especially this one because of the different ways it can be used. So it's really important to get that grounding before you engage in a conversation with such a loaded word and concept. So that conversation will help you be more informed about what deconstruction is, how it's used differently, and help you kind of just continue asking questions to understand and engage with that topic. So more about that later and what that will look like on our platform, which I'm excited to share at the end of our time today. But I'm thrilled that we have Mary Ellen joining us, and we'll be able to have her on live here. Mary Ellen, welcome.
Hi.
Hey, we're so glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here. Sorry, I'm just grabbing my water. Yeah.
Awesome. Are you able to turn on your video for us today, or you're not?
Yes, of course. I'm sorry. I didn't know that wasn't on.
No worries. It's sometimes.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome.
I'm so glad to be here. What an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Well, we just shared the pre-recorded content that you and Naomi did a couple weeks or a couple months ago at this point. My goodness, it's been a minute, but I remember listening to this episode and being just so thankful for the practicality of all of these tools. And so I'm really excited to get into the live Q&A. We've already got a couple questions here. So we'll get off. So one of our questions here is, and this is great because at the very end of an awesome episode, you threw in this concept, trauma informed. So let's talk about that. What does being trauma informed mean?
Yeah, so I mean, there's probably I could get more articulate about it. So then just to leave that with everyone. So sorry if that felt just more confusing than helpful, but basically trauma-informed care just means that rather than seeing people going through trauma as people who have something wrong with them, the question really, the fundamental cornerstone statement on trauma-informed care is not what's wrong with you, but what has happened to you. So that is, from there, we of course launch into all kinds of assessments, like the degree to which you're experiencing trauma, how old you were when you entered, when that happened and engaged, you were affected by trauma. And I should say affected is different things for different people. Some people, there's a lot to say about the trauma reaction. So some people didn't know they were affected by it, sometimes for a decade. So, but anyhow, we know that it was a trauma event. And so what happened to you is really the cornerstone versus what is wrong with you. And so definitions of trauma abound, but we can talk about that too. And if you want, but that's the key piece.
That's great. That's super helpful. Yeah. I mean, let's get into it. What else do you want to say about the definition of trauma?
Please do. And Mary Ellen, if I can jump in for 1 second, I just want to say we've had some interesting discussion recently about what does trauma mean. This idea of there being a classical definition of trauma, that maybe we would find on, say, Psychology Today, versus, as we see with words so often, this more, oh gosh, I feel like you used a word for this with me recently, or I could be mistaken, but more of just like our day-to-day application of the word versus the like technical definition of the word. We can see a difference in that oftentimes. So I'd love if you have any thoughts on that piece as well.
Yeah. There are two major pockets of trauma that I think about. One is I'm under 18. I'm not trained. I am not trained on trauma. I am not trained to protect myself. I am not maybe even validated to track this as trauma. So that's the under 18. And at which point we look at what's called complex PTSD. So there is that pocket. And then there's say a combat veteran, a police officer. They are trained, they are paid, they are, I didn't learn, they are tracking like this is true crime or this is a true enemy. And they're still afraid from that. So I think that's important to name, because a lot of people think like, if I'm not a combat veteran, I don't have trauma. That was how, when I was getting trained, trauma was really only identified for people who have been combat veterans. And so then as we've grown into seeing how much complexity in our health takes place when we have been facing trauma, and I'll go into the specificity of that definition in a second, facing trauma under 18, and how that if we have a trauma older, if we've had complex stuff, so meaning before the age of 18, then we have a new trauma after 18, we will have a compounding event. So hence why some combat veterans say, after 2 years, I was kind of okay. Well, generally, they will not have had complex trauma. So their process and their regeneration, of their nervous system is a different process. I really feel like that's important, because people feel like it's a character flaw, that why can't I just feel better and get better and talk about it and be done with it? So I really care about specifying those two camps of trauma in terms of age and development, training and identifying the enemy, identifying a problem. So trauma in general is kind of regardless of training and regardless of what, maybe is around us to help us. It's an event where we experience a complete loss of control and power. We are then having to go into all these reactions in our body to sustain the powerlessness.
Yeah.
And that is the trauma response, which is, the fight, flight, like the sympathetic nervous system, it goes into fight, flight, freeze, into fawning, which is the new F of the 4 4s now. And so I can explain that, but we, generally speaking, have gone into a body experience. Our body went into a complete survival experience, like to flee, to fight, to freeze, or to fawn. So that reaction is almost more important than what the powerlessness event was. So
would you mind explaining fawn for our audience, because they're probably less familiar with that one? It's possible maybe they haven't heard of freeze so much either, because I know people typically think fight or flight. And so maybe touching on both of those actually would be helpful.
So yeah, absolutely. And then fawning is actually the most confusing because it's the most endorsed. And so how can it be endorsed and a trauma response? So that's what makes it probably one of the more what we call intractable ones. We don't know. It's a part of feeling traumatized because it looks so good. And fawning is being pleasant, accommodating, a yes man, a yes person, if you will. I'll do that. Of course I can make that work. No, I don't have any boundaries. Yeah, whatever you want. The second piece of fawning that I care a lot about is Stockholm syndrome. So Stockholm syndrome is where we really apply the accommodation, but in a deeper belief way, meaning like, I feel sorry for the people that hurt me. I'm so worried about them. Well, they had a tough childhood. Oh, well, they meant well, I think. They weren't all bad. Stockholm syndrome comes from an event in, I think, 1979 in Stockholm. We had people who overtook a bank and held people captive. And in that process, they made the captives feel sorry for them for what they were doing. Psychologically, moved them into a place where they felt worried, and their compassion, if you will, was taken advantage of. So that's the twofold piece of fawning I care a lot to define. It's also like laughing at jokes that you don't think are funny. It's Someone's driving recklessly and you're like, can you slow down? I don't want to hurt your feelings, not wanting to hurt someone's feelings, but feeling like you have to just be okay and put a smile on. And yes, and be over focused on the abuser, the dominator, the addict, the critic, however you want to put that.
So I have so many thoughts going through my mind right now, but I'd love to ask you, when you think about, and there can be a distinction here for sure, but if you think of the at large area of religious abuse, so we're not strictly talking about cult abuse, we can be talking about mainstream abuse that occurs in a religious sphere, since that is who Be Emboldened serves. How do you think this plays out for people? Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, as an example, what would a trauma look like for someone who has experienced religious abuse?
Well, like you said, there's so many contexts for this, but a lot of it's through shame. So you're a bad person. God is not pleased with you. You are not wanted. You will have to do these things to get right with God. You will need to do these things to get right with our community. And it can be anything, like you're a female, so until you're not a female, you don't get to talk about that, so it can be like as fundamental as that, like a gender issue. A lot of times sin is identified as like the experience we have of God is get rid of your sin. And so rather than, hey, let's look at your whole context. What led you to use drugs? Like, what was happening? Did you need something? Do you feel sick? Have you been hurt? Right? So instead we get rid of that and we just say, you're a disappointment. You're a problem. And you're bothering us. And so get rid of that. And also you're bothering God. You're hurting God's feelings. Look at what he's done for you. Why can't you just get right? So this is, it could be traumatizing if you are saying like, I've been hurt though. I'm being sexually abused in my family. Well, that's because you had it coming. This is a big one. What sin was happening in your life that made that person do that to you? Especially if it's church leadership. Did you send the wrong signal? Were you wearing something? What did you say to them? What context was this at night? Was this we start looking for ways to blame the victim. We call that revictimization. So they had their primary victimization, whether in the home or through something in the church. And then we say, see, you had it coming because this is your lack of faith. Or you have a lack of faith and that's why you're still hurting. I've heard that one a ton. It's a lack of belief. And so don't hurt God's feelings, get over that. And that can be like, so God is your huge source of healing. And yet now God is a part of your oppression, and that alone is like, robbing us of our foundation for moving forward.
Right. Absolutely. And when you spoke earlier, you did. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. And when we think about, loss of control, like you spoke about earlier, this loss of control and power, this complete, I can't say yes. I can't say no. I'm completely, free will is gone. I don't have this ability anymore. I don't have any sense of autonomy over myself, my own being, and so my own personhood. And this is so common in the area of religious abuse because the trump card is significant. The trump card is salvation. It's, you're going to miss out on your calling from God. I hear that one. You're going to miss out on your calling. And then what's Jesus going to say say before you stand, when you stand before him? Is he going to say, I did not know you because you didn't actually obey and do what you were supposed to do? And when we're going in more extreme situations, it's always about salvation. It's you're not actually going to be one of the chosen. You're going to be outcast. You're going to be gone. And so that is such a huge threat. That is such a huge weapon to wield against someone. And that is where that trauma piece comes into play, because could someone say no? I mean, technically they can, but it's certainly not a real freedom of choice because of what they've been indoctrinated to believe is going to happen to them if they say no. And so there isn't really a sense of control in those situations, which then leads to, of course, that trauma experience. And then I see fawning a lot. I see that one a lot. I think that one's very common because people have been groomed to just say yes and to always be kind. To quote a specific group, keep sweet is something that gets said.
Okay.
And so it's this idea of, yes, you don't want to ruffle feathers. And yet when people especially have made an exit, they're trying to then start to speak up, but it's so uncomfortable. It's such a process to learn how to actually advocate for themselves and set boundaries, and to do so in a healthy way. It's a huge process. I know you know this, but just for those who are watching and listening, this is how trauma plays out. This is how it can connect to this area of religious abuse.
Yeah. Well, and to move into your other question about freezing, you know, it's really, if you can't say no, you know, and you know the threat exists, you've got to absolutely not notice what's happening, right? So the body says, okay, well then I'll just lock down. The expression to me of frozen is often freezing, but not, is often fawning, but it's not always. Freezing can just be doing a lot of alcohol, drinking and drugs. That's a part of freezing. It can be getting anorexic. It can be getting, practicing bulimia. I mean, so that you're just not in the feeling state, you are numbing out. It's too painful and you don't have a solution. You don't have any problem solving there. So you cannot afford to have those feelings. It's that simple. And how intelligent, like find a way to function without feeling it. Oh my goodness, it's brilliant. A lot of the trauma responses are brilliant and people are like often ashamed of them. I'm like, I think it's brilliant. I mean, your body figured out a way and you figured out a way so that you wouldn't die, because the threat is real. So obviously trauma is threatening. And we have some people who are high sensitivity personalities who could feel traumatized by something that they're witnessing. Other people, they're not as highly sensitive. That's just an inborn deal. Who are, we hear surviving gross violation, and it's impacting them for sure, but they have kind of a grit in them that's different than maybe a highly sensitive person who has just a much more friable or affected nervous system. So that's why I'm not one to say well, this is the only way a person is traumatized. It is however your body is going into a fight, flight, freeze, fawning. So.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
We have another question in here. Since we've talked, kind of really fleshed out what it means to be trauma informed, how does being trauma informed impact how I can relate to people?
I'm going to use a big, simple word: compassion. I think compassion seeks context. So trauma informed is, oh, you're neurotic. Well, you need to stop having anxiety, right? So, I mean, the opposite of trauma informed is to say, well, I'm going to label you as neurotic. You're paranoid. You don't trust people. Let's work on your trust with people. That's trauma informed says, Well, so what have you experienced with people? Let's say they have an issue with authority. We might say, well, you might have a not trauma-informed person would say, it sounds like you're defiant. It sounds like you're too submissive. And so trauma-informed would say, well, I bet you have good reason for your struggle with authority. What's happened to you with people in authority? So compassion, seeking context versus labeling somebody with, well, yeah, you have neurosis, you have defiance, you have an overly submissive issue, your issue is lack of boundaries, right? We say that. So we have to build your boundaries. We need to help, you got to learn how to see things as they are, and a person's like, oh, okay. So I sometimes not trauma-informed people, this is an interesting one where I've seen the blend, they'll know the background and they'll know like, hey, they know their dad really hurt the person. And they're like, well, so those are daddy issues. And that's not, you just need to get over it. Not everyone's your dad. I mean, how many times have people been nice to you? And obviously you're just holding on to this and being negative. Oh my, if I hear the word negative or positive, these words, negative, positive, like I kind of want to throat punch them. That is not a thing. That is not a thing. That is not a thing. Negative and positive is a lie from the pit of hell. So I say you're having difficult emotions or you're having pleasant emotions. You're not being negative. You don't have negative emotions. You're not being a negative person. You're in pain. So you're hurting. Something's happened to you. So, your body has a logical reaction now. People in authority are not safe. Okay. So how did this happen?
There's so much about posture that comes into play here. This difference between having a posture of, like you said, compassion, this posture of a desire to know. I desire to know you. I desire to better understand. I want those things. And that requires also a level of humility for oneself of, I don't know everything. I didn't live your story. I don't know your story. I don't know your experience. Yes, yep. I don't know your experience of your story. So maybe I know your story, but I don't know your experience of your story. So I'm going to come in with a humility and a desire to learn and to know and to understand. And you have to educate me on that versus I'm coming in and I'm telling you. So there's so much about posture, about heart position when we're working with someone who has experienced trauma.
Yep. And here's what's like when people say, oh my gosh, you've been a therapist for 25 years. And then I just kind of stumbled into trauma work. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. So that's another thing for another time. But, the reason I can do this is because people hold so much intelligence. They hold so much awareness. If you just give them a chance to say it and think out loud, that alone, like being given a chance, like just asking them questions from the ACEs questionnaire, and saying like, okay, now let's look at like, was there enmeshment with your family? Was there, just giving them a chance, like, and other people have written the ACEs assessment. I always say like, I'm going to use some assessments just so you don't have all the heavy lifting of like giving me the whole story by yourself. If it feels like an assistant, great. If it feels like an obstruction, and it interrupts what you need to do, then we don't use them. But a lot of times they're like, someone asked those questions before, like someone's already been thinking about this. That is curative. You're not alone. You didn't make any of this up. People have been thinking about this and they're worried about it in a good way, in a productive way, So, and people, if they're allowed to think out loud and say it, their intelligence starts to calibrate with softening. They're not alone. There's like a relief that's chemical. It takes on an intelligence of its own, just like sleep takes on an intelligence of its own. It's its own chemistry, lab. And and the relief of saying it and letting someone say it, and you're not a know-it-all, and you're not like, this is what's going on, you're not interrupting them. Gives them a chance for their body to heal, just saying it. So I'm so inspired to get to see incredibly brave and intelligent people, find their words and understand their lives.
Yes, and it's amazing the capacity and the ability to do so, like you said, when someone gives them the opportunity versus completely shuts them down.
Yeah.
And it's the shutting down just breaks my heart. I see it over and over and over again, just people getting shut down. And it's like, no, do you understand what it took for them to even take that baby step forward to open up? Do you know what that took? We want to encourage that. We want to applaud that. And we want to provide a safe space for them to continue to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And the safe place, I mean, just to really break it down is, I'm so glad you're saying something. I'm so honored that you're letting me know. I mean, a layperson, a therapist, it doesn't matter who we are as we're listening. It's like, I'm so glad you're letting it out. Just let it out. Like, it deserves to be heard. Those are just that's basic language, right? And people aren't needing fancy ideas when they're disclosing these memories and realities.
I think this leads really well into our next question. After talking about how we can be compassionate towards people, how we can really do some practical things to be active listeners and validate people's stories. A lot about what we talked about that is involved with trauma is triggers and being and how do you navigate that space. So this question is for a friend of someone who's being triggered. How can I support a friend who is being triggered? If they're in that moment and you can tell they're being triggered, how can I support them?
I don't know if we're like in a car, if we're in a living room. I don't know. I do care about those specifics, but I guess in general, it's about comforting the body. And so, you can't see my office, but basically, it's like a grandmother's place, like a good grandma, I guess, because people are like, grandmas are awful. Sorry about that. But like, say you have the ideal grandmother, it has weighted blankets and heating pads and access to hot chocolate and tea and candles and diffusers and essential oils. And because when the body is okay, then the brain can organize. If we go intellectual, like it's over and you're safe now, just take deep breaths, like, and it's like, let's get you a blanket. Let's get you something warm to drink. Let's get you something cool to drink. Let's get you a heating pad. Let's get you a hot water bottle. Let's light a candle. Let's get you some essential oils. Do you want a mint or some chocolate? So I think if I'm correct on my memory, like the toolbox concept is just super cool and easy. It's not only like something that can pretty much be ad-libbed and handled like on the road. We can get you something to drink. We can get you gum. We can get you anything that helps you realize like your body is working. It's just going through something that it's already survived. It's remembering something you've already survived, which is a huge statement. So it just feels like it has the room to show up right now. And it's not trying to hurt you, or it's just showing up as a truth. And the validation that we're giving it through the comfort of the body is that your truth matters. No one needs you to be done with your trigger. Let's just comfort that trigger.
So good. Naomi, anything you would want to add to that? That was excellent.
Good.
Not. I mean, I think she covered it beautifully. Something that really stood out to me was the idea of like, your truth matters. I think depending on the audience we're speaking to, that can be taken in very different ways. And so what we're speaking to in this context of this conversation is what you lived, your experience of this is what, like, we're not talking about this idea of absolute truth. Again, depending on who's watching this, we're not talking about,
yeah,
is it true that the sky is blue, or is it, is there absolute truth out there? That's a big question. And so again, I just wanted to bring attention to that. So Natasha, thanks for pulling me in for a second. That's not what we're referring to here. We're referring to, no, this is the truth of my story and what I lived. And this is what that experience was like for me, being who I am as a person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Super helpful distinction. Defining terms and defining what we mean is so important. So I'm glad you brought that up. And just as an encouragement to anyone out there, you should ask that question, if there's something that kind of tips you off, is like, what do you mean by that? Is a great way to have that conversation.
I say truth of experience. I think, I think you said my story I lived, and everyone's language is a little different. And so I like that. It's the story I've gone through. It's my understanding. It is my experience. It is, and again, like, let's just think about humans. Like, most of the time we're wanting to just feel regular. Even addicts are like, I just want to get to the normal place. Right. And so whatever normal, like, I want to feel regulated. So no one's like, let me just freak out. There are a few people out there, I guess I shouldn't say no one, but like, very rarely do we just want to break out in a sweat, or have a rapid heartbeat, or have a migraine, or feel like we're going to throw up. This is what a trigger is, or just like, bowl over with crying, or, people have all kinds of pain sensations when I'm working with their trauma. No one's like, yeah, I like that today. It's Wednesday at 2. I'd love to feel a ton of panicky pain. So let's be frank, like, most of the time, this is an unchosen situation. And we're just looking at that from the angle of, let's triage it. It deserves to have the information that this moment is okay. And it's okay to need to be okay. And so let's make sure we get you okay again. And so the sensate, like the 5 senses, want to engage that now is okay. And we're just kind of facilitating that through the warmth, or the texture of something, through the taste of something, through the smell of something, through the sight of something. So, and then the body, because it craves to feel regulated, it moves into the place like, okay, now I'm okay. Battling it psychologically and intellectually is the last good idea.
Yeah, that's really important. I know you talked a lot about that, the importance of the body and that physical response with a physical solution. We have another question of kind of on the other side of it, who is experiencing a trigger. What is my responsibility in regards to my triggers?
What's my responsibility? Well, I have so many thoughts. One is, please care about the fact that you have them in terms of preparing, so being prepared means it's valid. I might have this, and I don't know what your audience is okay with, but if you can get like an anti-anxiety medicine and you have it with you all the time. Did you know? So it's like, this is interesting statistics, and I don't know the exact number, but it like drastically lowers your likelihood of going into a panic attack if just knowing that you have medicine for a panic attack. So, the word responsibility, I guess, is opportunity for me. Like, I didn't ask for a trigger. I didn't, so what is my right? What is my design? My design is to be healed. My right is to heal, and to recover. And my design is to recover. Our brains are neuroplastic. They're built to recover if given the right conditions, right? So that's like, if that can be the theme, then it's not like, oh, I better be a good person and responsibly handle my trigger. because I'm worried about that a little bit in the question. But I would like to say, according to your rights as a human being, according to your design, that you're made in God's image, according to, your worth, and according to your dignity, you have the right to be prepared for your trigger, and to solve this. You have the right to solve this and to get all the little elements in place that work for you.
I love that. Something I have seen on the other side, and I say this with caution for anyone who's listening to this and is kind of new to this conversation and maybe doesn't experience this so much themselves. I say this definitely with a huge message of caution. This is not the norm. This is not what I'm about to share, is not typically what people are doing in regards to triggers. So we never want to jump to this as an assumption. At the same time, I have had some experiences of individuals who have, in their developing and their growth of how to work through they're maturing in this process of, goodness, okay, I have these triggers and I'm trying to learn what to do with them and how to help myself, seeking help. But in that, I have run into people at times who will use their behavior when triggered. The word trigger is used as something that makes their behavior okay, in a way of, well, I was triggered and so it was fine. And so there isn't this ownership of, I also do want to, maybe I said something that I wouldn't have typically said in that manner when I was triggered. And I do maybe want to come back and apologize for that and say, this is what was going on in my body. This is what I was feeling. This is something that I want to continue to work on. And so I have a sense of ownership over my behavior when I'm triggered in relation to other people, and wanting to maybe come back and address that afterwards. And so again, Mary Ellen, I'd love if you want to chime in on that. And again, a huge word of caution, because we don't want to assume that that is what someone's doing, that they don't care, or they don't. It's a huge process for someone to be learning and growing and even rewiring their brain, for goodness sakes. And so, I mean, it's a lot that person is taking on. But I did want to mention that as far as responsibility that I think we have, like when I recognize that something is triggering for me, in my mind, I think I have some work to do there.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And I mean, work to do and places to heal. Like I have the right to heal here. I just am careful about language. Believe, like, absolutely, like I when I hear people say, well, hurt people, like it's a real throwaway term, and it throws away like consequence. So I do think that might be another Q&A for us to process, because I really care about being detailed with that. Consequence, yes, like if I scream and yell because I'm triggered, if I drive drunk and I'm because I was triggered, these are truths that I'm not suggesting like I'm triggered and therefore I excuse recklessness, because now what I'm doing is I'm compounding my trauma with more trauma, and now I'm hurting everyone. And there's a reality and a statistic that the more I'm acting out, the lower my self-esteem is getting. So that's, acting out, like screaming, raging, driving drunk, whatever. I'm just using like basic examples. I don't know, but throwing that across the room, breaking things, like slamming doors. I'm triggered. Therefore, I can get reckless, and that will lower our self-esteem. We will lose like an ability to see ourselves as good. We are literally throwing dirt on our dignity when we do that. So the responsibility or ownership would be to dignify the pain, is to say, I am not doing well. I can see my throat's like closing, my heart rate's going up. I gotta go and get stabilized. That would be a transition statement. I've got to go and get, balanced, back out again. That is an intellectual statement that bridges our ability to go and then say, that's my exit to go and take care of this or that. I need to go take a bath. I need to go. People read the Psalms. I honestly, like, whatever it is that's like, that will stabilize my brain. And I'm still finding it out. You can change your mind, what balances you out as you deal with life. And so, but the more we're not, like, if we go into recklessness, our trigger actually gets worse and it becomes more frequent. Mm-hmm. So, there's nothing healing there.
Yeah. Right. That doesn't even serve us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good. One last question. I know we're at time here, so just hopefully a quick answer here, but a good one to end on, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We say here, I've heard people say that triggered is a cultural word, that it's just a trendy thing right now, but the response from triggered people is so real. So was this called something else before, or is this really a new concept?
That's a really good question. Like a curious question. I think all the questions have been truly solid gold. I actually don't have a solid answer for that. I would say, like, I've heard the word triggered since, 1992 or something. Before that, it could have been, I imagine that it'd be like someone's in hysterics. Someone is emotional. Mm-hmm. Someone is crazy. Someone is neurotic.
Overreacting. So I would
guess those were our words before. Yeah. And it's an awesome word because it's not like, I'm unstable, I must get stable. Like I just said, like, I'm going to go stabilize myself, but I'm not owning I'm unstable. Like, I think that's why language is so weird. I'm not labeling I'm unstable. I'm saying something's happening. Again, trauma-informed care, something's happening to me. Something happened to me. Something is happening to me. And I have the right to get balanced and stable with this thing that's happening to me. So I don't know what to say about the trending. I wonder what, I think that, like all things, there are exaggerations, but we're really talking about like triggered as in my throat is closing, my eyes are myopic, I'm losing the ability to feel my hands. Like we're not talking like, I don't know, I'm triggered, the waitress won't like give me my food in time, and that's hangry. That's not triggered. You know what I mean? Like, so I do think that there's just always going to be a flow of immaturity into anything that's knowledgeable and wise.
Yeah, that's good. Wow. Thank you so much for the conversation. This is
no, absolutely.
Yeah, I think these topics.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Best use of time in the world.
Absolutely. We'll hold you to it.
Besides hugging my boys. This is the best use of time. Yeah. So
we love it. Well,
and Mariel, you crack me up. I mean, there's just a couple of quotes. I mean, we got throat punch. We got.
And I know. And I do sometimes swear like a sailor when I'm really mad, but I won't do that on this place.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
You guys are awesome. Like you're like angels and sages all mixed in, into the flow of one and in the flow of a human body. So let's do this again, okay?
Sounds great. Well, have a great day, Mary Ellen. All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you all for listening in here. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Just a real quick thing, I want to highlight, I started talking about this earlier, but we do have a new podcast video format that we're excited about. So check out the link in the chat to hear and watch our most recent podcast about deconstruction, where you'll not only get to see our new rebranding and how beautiful that is, but you'll get to see the conversation between Lemon and Naomi. So we're going to continue doing that, which is really exciting. Excited to offer that to you. you. If you want more than just an audio experience, you have the visual as well. So check that out. Thanks so much for your support and hope you have a great Wednesday. All right, bye-bye.